So do I still recommend the Nissan Frontier with the 3.8 liter? I've recommended it to people quite often on this channel. And Eric from I Do Cars just did this video about how it has a fatal design flaw. So I'm going to go through this, kind of walk you through my thoughts on what I agree with, what I don't. Kind of my responsibility if I'm sitting here telling people to buy this engine, buy this vehicle, that if something changes or new information comes up, I think I should at least comment on it and tell people what I believe. So let's jump in. So the first part, and I think this is a really key part in the video, and to kind of keep this in back of mind when you're thinking about what's going on with this teardown, just watch this engine. The valve cover just came off.
Did we expect it? Oh, it's oozing. We did not really expect any different, but that looks terrible. So this is what the inside of this looks like. Now, I will say something kind of interesting. It does look like there was a bit of varnish in here, quite a bit, but anytime coolant is introduced to the oil, obviously there's some other issue here, whether it's water or coolant, I don't know, but it can break up a lot of that varnish and get it into the oil and get it out of where it's sitting. So that's why you'll see little clean spots here.
So I think this actually looks like an engine that was not maintained well at all. Of course, he didn't have the VIN number. He didn't have history from what I could tell. Pretty hard to determine, but Eric says that in the video, a lot of people are jumping to conclusions about this. And he says, hey, clearly this engine was not maintained. That's the biggest thing you need to keep in mind.
I bet this thing wasn't the best taken care of engine, and the only reason it doesn't look super sludgy is the introduction of coolant or water.
Now, the second part is the water pump. That's really the entirety of this video is talking about the water pump and the design. It's behind the timing cover. In this version, this revision of the engine, the 3.8, they actually removed the access cover. So I do agree with Eric on this point that they don't give you access to replace the water pump without pulling that entire timing cover off. That's a dumb design. Nissan should have never done that. That's just terrible. But listen to what he says here.
Could be the internal water pump that's inside the timing cover. Now, normally this would be a no-no, but these have proven to be fairly reliable. I can count on one hand, on actually two fingers, the number of these that I've seen fail and leak a bunch of coolant into the crankcase. It doesn't mean this isn't one of them. Oh no! Oh, okay, 3 fingers. Wait, is it 3 fingers? I don't know what I'm doing here. Well, that's unfortunate. As I was saying, there's more than one way for coolant and oil to mix, and it looks like the water pump has failed.
So in this engine, the water pump did fail, and the shaft of the water pump has a lot of play in it. Eric suspects that the bearings have gone out on it. Of course, when you don't maintain an engine, you don't change your coolant. You're very lax about your intervals, which this engine looks like it was pretty just not maintained well. Just to keep in mind, so the old VQ40, the 4-liter version before this, it used to cost about $1,400 to, remove the timing chain cover. You could replace your timing chain, your guides, the water pump, all the seals, everything. The dealer would do it for about $1,400. So it used to be actually a pretty reasonable repair. I mean, $1,400, coming around at 180, 200,000 miles really isn't that big of a deal. But the fact that you have to do your water pump here and most likely the chains and the guides and everything are going to be fine. And this is probably going to be 120,000 miles. People are going to start doing preventative maintenance. That's not very good on Nissan for designing it this way. So here's the internals, and he just pulled the water pump out.
Look at the wear on this thing from the angle. This thing is wrecked. That's not all it wrecked. Look at the damage to the block. That is unfortunate. That can create some pretty big issues with cooling systems. This is very deep here.
So obviously that just came from the water pump bearings, and it basically started to, it's spinning off center. So then it starts to chew out this area here on the inside of the block. And here is more evidence that this vehicle just wasn't taken care of.
And the oil filter, well, let's just say whoever owned this vehicle did not do a very good job at taking care of their vehicle. I bet that before the water pump incident, this thing was a sludgy monster.
So here's where probably the most I'm going to disagree with Eric here on I Do Cars. He actually calls out and says there was another YouTuber. I think I know who that YouTuber is, but I'm not 100% certain. He talks about how this other YouTuber compares the water pump replacement cost from Nissan to other costs in other vehicles, and he doesn't agree with that.
I did find one video where a guy was trying to calm the fears of those that have bought or are looking to buy one. And he did so by comparing the labor times to replace the water pump on the VQ38. And he compared the VQ38, the new Frontier, to the oil pump belt on a 3-liter Duramax and the oil pump belt on a 5-liter Coyote. Now, also keep in mind, I've torn down multiples of those and we have yet to see a failed belt. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I have crossed paths with a lot of those engines and none of the failure modes with those have been the oil pump belt. And I don't really think that's a fair comparison. I like to compare apples to apples, not apples to trees and rocks.
So that's where I disagree with him here, because I actually enjoy comparing apples to trees and rocks, because I think the manufacturer gets to decide what they're going to put forth. So if a manufacturer wants to put together a V6 with fewer main bearings and twin turbos, and another manufacturer doesn't want to put twin turbos and dual water pumps and a wet oil pump belt on their engine, that's just choices. So I don't really necessarily care if one manufacturer chose to use a steel chain and another one a Kevlar belt or whatever. The only thing I really care about is kind of the repair cost, the maintenance cost, and then whether or not something is failing abnormally. So in the case of the Frontier here, it sounds like there are multiple different reports of Nissan techs and a handful of people in the forums that I found with water pump failures prematurely. Most of them make it like 80 to 100,000 miles. Some didn't. And typically, if you're doing this as like preventative maintenance, the biggest question or the biggest annoyance here is that it's going to cost $2,000, $2,500 from the dealer to get this done, according to some dealerships. So I disagree with that. I think if you're going to evaluate vehicles, you kind of have to evaluate everything that could fail, right? If you have a 3.5 EcoBoost and you're ending up doing turbos, you're spending thousands of dollars doing turbos. Will it grenade your engine when they go? Probably not. If you're doing a wet oil pump belt, that's what Eric's comparing here. Maybe the wet oil pump belt isn't a fair comparison because we don't see a lot of those fail prematurely yet. Time will tell if they're really going to be, something that's like a 10 to 15 year part. I think that's what's going to happen is people are going to neglect those just like someone neglected this VQ. And we're going to start to see wet oil pump belts fail because of neglect or someone didn't want to spend the money to actually replace them. So I think when you're researching cars, you have to just look at the bulk data. He really goes on to say, he's like, look, this is just one engine. Maybe there's a handful. You could probably find 10 to 15 out of the hundreds of thousands that are sold. Now, if you compare that to like GM 6.2 issue, where they've got 30,000, 50,000 that are breaking down with main bearing problems. I mean, there's all failure modes with engines. So I don't think this is a critical design flaw given how long this engine has been in production. I think it's been since 2020 or 2021. It was either late 2020 or early 2021, I believe, that it was in production in the Frontier. And we just haven't seen that many of these fail like that. You find them in the forums if you really dig for them, but you're not seeing them just crop up everywhere. That said, I think the design sucks. Nissan could have just made this like everybody else does, like any other water pump, or even like their VQ40. They could have put an access port there and provided you a way to replace it yourself on the cheap, do it as preventative maintenance. And then Eric did say that he was going to hopefully get a water pump and he's going to try to press them out and look at an old one, look at the one from the 3.8, look at the one from the 4.0, and see if the bearings are different or if maybe it's a little lesser quality. That might tell us a little bit more about whether or not these are going to start dropping off and not last as long as the VQ40. But the VQ40 was an incredible engine. I mean, you see them running up to 500,000 miles, no problem. If you're really that concerned, it's probably cheaper to just replace your water pump as preventative maintenance than it is to swap cars, because anytime you trade or sell your vehicle, you're going to lose thousands of dollars anyway in the transaction, kind of like selling your home. So I just think that this one thing with this engine, and it's really the only thing that's ever come up with this design, is just not that big a deal at this point compared to all of the other failures we see from so many other manufacturers. It is what it is. Hopefully this helps you guys out. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Till next time.